Welcome back to the Unstuck movement. I am your host, Rob Z. This platform is to help you break the chains that are holding you back in your life. These are true testimonies of breakthrough to show you that that breakthrough in your life is possible. So I love to start these episodes off with a powerful question. Powerful questions lead to great breakthroughs in our lives. The amazing Candice Snyder is here with us today. And Candice, I'm going to jump in with this question right off the bat. How did a life-altering injury for you become the positive turning point for your life?
Okay, so I was a dental hygienist for 14 years, and a life-changing injury where I fell off a broken dental chair caused me to have to give up that career. And in my mind, all those years, my identity was tied to being a dental hygienist.
Mm.
So having to figure out who I really was after I could no longer work as a dental hygienist, there was a period of time where, yes, I had to get a definitive diagnosis. I had to go through surgery. I had to go through all of these things. And then I had the breakthrough. And the breakthrough came when, just for some therapeutic, help on my own, I was making my own jewelry. And I had these magazines and I was working on a piece and I saw this advertisement for a jewelry company. And I said, oh my gosh, I love these earrings. How am I going to make these? I don't know how to solder. So I reached out to the company to find out about these earrings. And the next thing you know, I jumped into direct sales, no direct sales experience whatsoever. But the breakthrough came because I was willing to take a chance on something I didn't know, knowing that I needed something in my life to give me purpose and find a passion. That was just the beginning of leading me down the passion and purpose route. There's a lot more that goes with that, but the injury itself and having to figure out who I was is really what started the transformation of, the breakthrough.
There's two amazing things, two amazing questions and points that I want to touch on here about this, right? Just in the first couple of sentences that you said, it's amazing how we attach ourselves, our identity to the things that we do in life. Like you were a dental hygienist and you didn't know how to be anything but a dental hygienist, and how quickly injuries can happen to us and come completely out of the blue and completely change our lives. So I want to dive into those two things. But first, I must just welcome everybody here. This platform is because we get stuck at many different places in our lives, right? And we need examples, true examples of people who have had the breakthrough to prove, because when you're going through the thing, it's really hard to see outside of the thing that you're going through. But know that there's great things on the other side of that breakthrough that you're dying to have. This platform is brought to you by the Connected Leaders Academy. Check out connectedleadersacademy.com. Candice Snyder is a gratitude ambassador and the host of the Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities podcast, inspiring others to live with passion and purpose. Candice is also a market partner and team leader at Monat. And so I want to ask you, Candice, just because I think this is not a uncommon thing to have happen, to have an identity as the job you've been doing for your entire life. But what happens when that identity is taken from you? How did that kind of rock your world?
Oh, well, really, when you are the breadwinner at the time, it's even more so tied to your identity, right? Because you're responsible for bringing in that income. And also, as a dental hygienist, I had that obligation to the dentist I worked for, to my patients, to the team that I led in that office. So really, there was a lot wrapped into it. It wasn't just like, here I am, dental hygienist, stay in my lane, clean people's teeth, take x-rays, educate on, better dental health. It was a lot more than that. But having it been my identity for so long, I felt lost. Like I was really in disbelief that like this falling off this chair was going to change my life, turn it upside down, that I would have to literally give up that career and kind of figure out a new life. And let me also say that my kids at the time were 6 and 2. So that's a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. And then you need to also factor in that I was living in daily pain. So barely functioning because the pain was so bad, and then trying to get that diagnosis to eventually
Mhm.
have surgery. So that took years. That took years. And by the time I got to that first direct sales company, it was 10 years in the making from the time I stopped working to the time I found that company. Or the
Mm.
company found me, depending on how you look at it. Um, but this comes up a lot when I have conversations with people about how we are so wrapped up in that our purpose is our identity, but it's really not true because we are so much more than our job or our career. There are so many aspects to who we are, and that's when we have to do like that deep dive into who am I?
Yeah, and that deep dive can take a long time, right? The wilderness of figuring that out. You said a 10-year period of
10
like
years. 10 years. Yeah.
as and so and this also involved the injury and the surgeries that came along with it, just going through that whole period. Speak to, like, being in the midst of that and how it feels like you're never going to get out of it. How did you make it through it?
Honestly, I was in depression. I was in severe depression, but, as a wife and mother, I still needed to function in those capacities. I still needed to take care of my kids. I still needed to kind of run the household. And I still kind of had to have that upbeat, you know, facade. But
Mhm,
behind closed doors, I was a basket case, literally. I mean, I'd cry a lot. I'd be in a pity party a lot. Um, I'd worry a lot as to, what am I going to do? Who am I going to become? Where am I going to go? When I say where am I going to go, where am I going to go in life?
mhm.
Where's my purpose? And um, how can I stay connected to people? Because I lost, community too from, that injury.
Yeah, I mean, that was your whole identity. Everybody you worked with, the
Hmm.
clients, I'm sure that the patients that you had, like, you probably had so many built-in relationships, and all of that had to change. And the word purpose, it gets used so often that sometimes, well, a lot of the times it loses its meaning. But it's so important that we have some sort of purpose. And I think people especially find this whenever they retire. I see this from people in my life who retire. They start to find a new purpose for their life, or they don't. And when they don't, things get bad. And when they do, things get better and better and better. What is your purpose?
My purpose now is to be a light and to share inspiring stories to the world. I'm sharing other people's stories
Hmm.
of inspiration, tragedies and triumphs, things that people have gone through to inspire those that are sitting on the sidelines or not sure what their passion is, what their purpose is, to go find it and do it and don't be that spectator. Go out there and do the thing that you want to do because, we only get this one life and it is
Hmm.
short.
What changed so this 10 years, right, of trying to figure it out, that's an awfully long time. 10 years is when you think of like a grieving process for something, there's no timestamp for a grieving process, but 10 years is a long journey to go through and like a grieving process. I think from like your former life and all the stuff that you went through. Was there, and I know there's not always a moment, but was there something that had happened during that period that you're like, oh, I'm gonna get out of this thing. I'm gonna come out
Yes.
on the other side of this. How did you keep the faith through that?
One of the great things about direct sales, and direct sales, there's a lot of pros and cons, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say about it. But one
Mm,
of the great things about direct sales is the amount of coaching and growth you get, how your mindset changes, how you become more positive, how do you become more optimistic, how you develop self-confidence. And those things started with that first direct sales company.
mm,
If I fast and I was with that company for 10 years until they decided to sell and decide not to have reps anymore. And I thought that was the end of direct sales. But then I was introduced to Monat, and I decided to join that company because of the community. That was my initial reason. I was missing the connections I had previously. But when I decided to apply to become a gratitude ambassador, that was what really catapulted me figuring out my passion and my purpose. And that was, I filled out this lengthy form, and it was asking you all these different things that you've done to volunteer. Who do you support? What are the causes you care about? All these different things. And then I got to the very last question, and it asked me if I was a certain rank in the company. And I was like, oh no, I've hit this rank, but I'm not maintaining this rank. So what do I do? And I said to myself, literally, I can, like it was just happened yesterday. I said, well, if nothing else, I know who I am from filling out this form. I'm the humanitarian. I'm the cheerleader. I'm the person that's gratitude and giving back and supporting the causes and making people aware of causes. So I hit the submit button anyway, thinking, they're not going to pick me, right? I'm not maintaining my rank. And lo and behold, 2 months later, now this was 2020. So we were in lockdown and our conference was virtual. And I was sick at the time too. So I'm home alone. And I'm watching on my big screen TV that's here above me. And I see my face right in the middle of the screen that I was one of the chosen 20-something market partners to be a gratitude ambassador. And that was like the defining moment, the filling out that form, hitting submit. Because when I look back to my growing up and my parents and the way I was raised, that was what was instilled in me. My family was like that giving family. My parents took in all my friends that were having problems. They were always supporting causes. My dad would buy football equipment for those, less fortunate. And that's where it all stemmed from. And over the years, I was like, well, I've had the Marines at my house and for Toys for Tots. And my kids and I have gone to the, animal shelter and cleaned up the cages. We've done all these things. And that's really how I figured out that this is who I am. It's all about the helping others. And that has become my mission. But my mission now is really sharing other people's stories of what their mission and their passion and purpose is.
What I love about hosting a podcast and having conversations like this all the time is you find themes, right, and threads. And one of the threads of breakthrough is always the selfless service that we give to other people helps us to find our purpose and helps us to find our gifts that we were uniquely given, right? And so I think it's really interesting that is just a constant. Like you can't discover, most of the time, you can't discover yourself by only being with yourself. You discover yourself when you're serving other people, when you get outside of yourself, and then you start to realize this whole gratitude ambassador journey. Like it started with whenever you were a kid with your family and how your family had this heart of gratitude, practice of gratitude, like in the family. You learn so much about you because nothing's about you. It's about other people and how you're showing up for them. And it's amazing what comes out of that. It's just really hearing the stories again and again and again of selfless service. And that helped me to discover what my gifts were is like a common theme.
Right.
And so I want to ask you this for your podcast, because that's the great thing about podcasts. There's threads. So you've talked to tons of people about passion, about purpose, about possibilities. And I'm curious to know what the common themes are that you've noticed. I want to talk about that in 60 seconds, right after we give a shout out to the Connected Leaders Academy.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world, globally, all across the country, high performers, titans of industry. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, Move the needle in your business. More clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line. And of course, grow your circle and your network like never before. This is where you want to be. Join the Connected Leaders Academy today. We are scaling massively. We want to welcome you in. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JASCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
So, Candice, through the Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities podcast, what are the threads that you've seen from the stories that you've heard?
Definitely helping others and giving back. That's first and foremost. Often the story of transformation, because I always start with like that backstory question, like, who are you and how'd you get to be doing what you're doing today? And it always kind of stems from something they love to do way back when, whether it was a child or something as a teenager. Everybody kind of has this when you get through high school, right? You think you're supposed to have this job that has a good income. We make sure we have insurance and all those things and start a family. But then we look back when it's time to like kind of slow down a little bit. We've done the family thing because a lot of, my guests are middle age, right? And they've gone through this transformation. They're not doing what they started out doing.
Mm-hmm.
They've created new jobs for themselves, or they've gone into entrepreneurship where they can give back even more and where money isn't necessarily the biggest factor. It's like, if you love what you do, the money will follow. And I see more of that in the guests that, are on the podcast. It's what you're passionate about. What's the thing you love to do? What's the thing that drives you? That fuels your purpose, really. Because a lot of times what happens is that purpose and that passion are now melded together. They're not like, okay, well, I have this hobby that I really enjoy doing and I'm doing it on the side. And then I have my job and I'm doing that because I need the income. But now I can take the things that I really love and start earning an income doing that as well.
I love this. And so right now I'm looking up a quote that I just had a coaching call, and this quote came up during the coaching call, and now it's coming up again. It's such a good quote because it's obviously popping up over and over again. And I think when something in your life pops up over and over again, it's a telltale sign. You need to make sure you listen to that. Because that theme comes up. One of the things you were just saying is something that my favorite question to ask people is, what did you want to be when you were 10 years old? I love that question. And it's what you were just saying. Like, if you go back in time, like say somebody's middle-aged and they are restarting their life and they're not sure what the heck to do. What did you want to be when you were 10? There's a lot of signs. It might not be the exact thing that you wanted to be when you were 10 years old, but the essence of that thing gives really good clues on where you're supposed to go, because It's like you're old enough at 10 to know what you really enjoy, but you're young enough where the world hasn't influenced you to do something else for the money or to please people or whatever that might be. You just naturally want to do the thing that you love doing. For yourself, what was that thing at 10 years old?
Oh my gosh, this is so funny that you brought this up, because if you listen to the intro of my podcast, I actually say in there, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a teacher, a nurse, or a flight attendant. And when I look back now, those are all things that help people, right? They're all like service fields that inspire people in some way, shape, or form. And that's what I'm doing in a different way. And so when I decided to start the podcast, that all came into play.
And see, that's the important thing too. When you ask that question to somebody, they're probably going to say something that they're not doing. And they're like, well, that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. Or that, say, being like a flight attendant, that has nothing to do with what I'm doing now or what my purpose is or whatever. But you have to go beneath the surface a little bit. And then you start to uncover, like, well, you wanted to serve, you wanted to help. You being a nurse, you really wanted to be able to help people heal, right? And so a teacher teaches, but also in teaching, you have to be a storyteller. In teaching, you have to help people find out things about themselves they didn't know otherwise. So you're helping people to like reveal these things. So there's always an essence there. I love that. It's such a good question because
Right.
it helps to redirect people. Like for
Mhm.
me, when I was 10, I wanted to be a radio DJ, which I ended up being for 20 years, but I also wanted to be a professional wrestler, right? So there's the entertaining component. There's the component of wanting to connect with others. There's also a component of just like in radio and professional wrestling, it's just enjoying what you're doing. Also, there's like an art form to it that you love about it. So those things all match up with exactly what I'm doing now also. And I had to at one point in time when somebody asked me that question, I had to redirect and be like, this is after I had left radio and I was doing digital marketing. And I was like, man, I'm not in the right place right now because it doesn't match what I was at when I was 10 years old. And that's why I'm missing something. So that's really good. The quote, it's from the book, The Prosperous Coach, which if you're a coach, you should read The Prosperous Coach, probably the best book ever written on coaching. But there's a quote in the book from Howard Thurman, and it says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And this is going to be counterintuitive to how we usually look at things because we hear in like business and marketing, we'll find out what the problem is and then you build a solution for it. Sure. But if the problem you're solving is not something that makes you come alive, then you can build all the solutions in the world. And number one, they might work, but you're going to be miserable. Or number two, they're just not going to work because you don't have the passion for that thing. So you need to find the thing that makes you come alive. What makes you come alive?
What makes me come alive? Every person that I talk to, I learn something. Every single guest I've had on the podcast, every conversation I have out in networking, I'm always learning. And the thing that has made me come alive the most really is that we're so much more alike than different. And years ago, I didn't think that way. I used to think like, oh my gosh, I have all these, issues and problems, and like nobody else has these issues or problems. But really, when it comes down to like the core of people's values and who they are, we're so much more alike. And when we realize that, we can do so much more together. And that's what makes me come alive.
Helping people find the commonalities of how
Yeah.
how similar we are, especially today, right? Everybody, it makes with the culture, whatever you want to call it, the media, whatever. We all think that, well, tribalism in general, it's been that way for a long time. It seems like everybody's separate and we're all these different people.
Right.
But whenever you get into service, that's when you really start to realize, oh, wow, we're all the same, even though we're having different problems. The general theme is the
Mhm.
same. And that is really, the more you can understand that, the easier things get. And that's one of the things I love about life is things are a lot more simple than we realize. They might not be easy, but they're pretty simple. And
Right.
that to me has been something that's been really helpful. Just remembering that piece of the puzzle. So when you started the podcast, so this is another thing. I love talking to people about podcasting because I'm very passionate about it, very passionate about broadcasting. How long did it take you to start the podcast? And that's the first question, right?
Oh my gosh. Well,
And
you'll
why did
laugh.
you do it? Yeah. And why did you do it?
Okay. So I had a business coach. I've had, several over the years, but at the time I was at a virtual networking event and the guest speaker was talking about podcasting for your business. And my coach, who also ran that networking group, she was messaging me privately on Zoom saying, are you writing this down? Are you taking notes? Because this is what you should be doing next. And in my mind, I was like, I don't think so. Technology's not my thing because, my kids have always called me like technophobe. So I was like, oh no, technology, I don't think so. But I said I would have a conversation with this woman who teaches how to have a podcast up and running in 30 days. So after speaking with her, shout out to Cammie Lehman, I said, okay, I'll do it. And in 30 days, I had a podcast. I had the 3 words, passion, purpose, possibilities. I didn't know what to do with them. I just,
Mhm.
those words were just kind of swirling around for quite a while, but I really had no clue. And starting a podcast was definitely not in, you know, my thought process at all until after that day. Um, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Mm. Why?
Yeah. Why? For the connections that I've made, for the people I've got to meet, for the causes I've been able to bring more awareness to, and
Mhm.
for my own cause. Mental health is a big platform for me. I lost my brother to suicide. So I saw this as another way to talk about mental health and try to help break the stigma of mental health discussions.
Mm.
And so that comes up often in conversation. But then there's so many other causes that I become aware of talking through my guests that I can help, bring to the world for more people to hear about.
It's really this is so when I heard this, so first of all, congratulations that you launched your podcast in 30 days because I've known people who've been talking about it for a decade. I know
Yeah,
people who bought thousands of dollars in podcasting equipment, and whenever they came to me and they said, "I really want to start this podcast," I was like, "Well, what are you going to talk about?" And they're like, "I have no idea." And I'm like, "Holy cow, okay." And just the indecision, it's such a gift. Podcasting, creating content is such a gift and a curse because it's such a gift because you can do whatever you want, but it's a curse because you can do whatever you want, right? So
right,
there's like this deciding, and when you have somebody, and that's what I love to help people do too, is like help people decide. Listen, it might not be perfect. It's not going to be perfect, actually, right off the bat, but you're gonna make a decision. You're gonna choose. You're gonna jump, and then you create while you're doing it. You're
right,
building the boat while you're sailing it, right? And that's really fun when you embrace the excitement of that and figuring it out. But also all the amazing things that come along with starting a podcast that I don't hear them talked about enough, but things that have changed my life. Just number one, you become a better conversationalist. So you become better at listening. You become better at just understanding people and letting people speak. Um, you like the connections that you make, right? Those sorts of things. But the personal development that comes along with it is so huge and does not get talked about enough. The ability to communicate is so huge because we're lacking that so much in our culture. And that you can't even understate how important that is. That when you're in a podcast conversation, nothing in the 40 minutes that we talk, it distracts me. I will not let anything distract me. And I'm sure
right.
you feel the same exact way when you're doing yours. That never happens. That might not
Absolutely.
even in a job interview or something like that, right? Say somebody's on their deathbed and you go to visit them, you're probably going to get distracted at some point. But when you're in a podcast, nothing distracts you because it has to be a meaningful, purposeful conversation. That's what the world's missing. That's what we're missing as people. So it makes sense that's why it's so popular. But also, when you do one, it helps you grow so much. What are some of the main ways you've seen yourself grow personally? How long have you had your podcast now for?
It was 2 years in April. I did take a 3-month break that first year. In the beginning, I was interviewing mostly women entrepreneurs, women that were probably in corporate first and then decided to start their own business. And I was a little bit overwhelmed and I was busy with some other things too. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take a little bit of time and think about things. Like really, I just wanted to like think about things. And
Mhm.
then, but I missed it. I missed doing the podcast. And I was like, when I come back, there are so many stories to be told that I'm going to interview all people, men, women, young, old, and everything else. And it made such a difference in the stories and the way I was as a person
Mhm.
because it to me it was more engaging. I was learning more. I was meeting people from all over the world, actually, not just the country. But
Yeah.
it definitely changed me in the sense that I think it made me more outgoing, even though I'd still like to be like when I do my podcast, I'm on Zoom, it's recorded, and then it goes out into the world. So it's not live like this, but it definitely made me more of an outgoing person. It's definitely made me a better listener,
Mm.
um, for sure.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I had put a post on my Facebook page a little while ago, and it was just, if you had a podcast, what would it be about? And I got like 140 comments on that post, and it made me realize, like, holy cow, everybody has like a podcast inside of them. It
They
seems like
do.
everybody you talk to, if you bring up podcasting, like, oh, I'd love to do one. Oh, well, here's what we would talk about. Everybody has, I shouldn't say everybody, but lots of people have already thought about this, and they
Right.
thought about like who they would co-host it with, or who they would have on as guests, or what is the thing they would talk about. I find that really interesting, because it's like we're all, um, I don't know if we're all meant to do it, but we all should be doing it in some form in our life. And I think it's just especially when you have a job like being a dental hygienist, right? I'm sure when you were a dental hygienist, you never thought about being a podcast host,
Oh, no.
but to have that on the side would be such a fun extra thing in your life to do, that we all need that outlet. And I think especially when your identity is set in one area, like you said, as a dental hygienist, that was your identity. So when you jump into something where you can be creative and kind of create whatever you want, and you interview people who have created whatever they wanted, then that starts to open up the potential for you.
Right.
What has that led you to as time goes on? Has that opened up ideas for you, or doors that, what's in store for the future? How do you see
Oh,
that?
well, there's a few things in store right now. There is a collaborative passion, purpose, and possibilities anthology book in the works, with 20 something women authors, each writing their story of passion, purpose, and possibility, and sharing it and inspiring others. The podcast has grown so much, and I feel so like lucky in the sense that people want to be on this podcast all the time, that I've had to turn away people. I've had to turn away the agents that are sending me people, because there's just not enough Mondays in the year, right? So to get the podcast to at least 2 episodes a week, possibly 3, would be the ultimate. And so,
Yeah.
those are the goals.
Love that. And have you found it possible to monetize the podcast?
I have a barter that right now with a lovely woman named Mandy Cordia, and her business is called The Kindness Cause, Cause. She has an e-commerce site where every purchase you make through her site gives back to some charitable organization.
Hmm.
And so she has my podcast merchandise on her site, and I do her commercial. And I do have somebody in the works right now. I'm just waiting for the sign off on the commercial to be a sponsor for the podcast.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that too, because that's one. It becomes a thing, and I try to just encourage people, like, this becomes something that is a viable option, like, for anything you want to do in life. The podcast can be the core hub for the things you want to do. You can use it as a platform to take you other places, to have you meet. And I had Ivan Meisner on a couple of weeks ago, who's a billionaire. He created BNI, Business Networking International. And I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. I didn't have it on my bucket list to talk to a billionaire, but when I did it, I was like, that was incredible. It was just so cool that the doors that open up, the people you get connected to just because you have a platform, and that automatically creates this authority that you have, this expertise that you have, and this professionalism that people really take you seriously. And that also, you can't put a dollar amount on that. You can't put a dollar amount on the fact that you're writing a book. You're writing an anthology book with people that have been on the show, and you can now create something and sell it in a bookstore, but also the podcast and all the different streams of creation, of income, of business that can, and of impact, right? The impact that you're making in different ways, just because of a platform that really, if you want to do a podcast for free, you can do it for free, literally. You can pay no money besides have an internet connection. And if you have maybe buy an earbud microphone or whatever, they usually come with your phones anyways. Like, you can pretty much do it for free.
Right. When I started, then went to the podcast school, basically, I just needed my computer, a mic, and that was pretty much it. I don't even think we needed anything else. It wasn't like equipment. Like there wasn't a lot of equipment. And if you don't want to do the editing and all those things yourself, there are plenty of people out there that are willing to do it for you.
Yes, very
and that,
true.
well, the price can run the gamut for it. So you have to definitely do your research. But,
Yeah.
for me, not loving technology, my podcasts go out to an editor.
Yeah.
And then I just fill out a form. They say, fix this, give it a title, and they do the rest.
Yeah, there's many different possibilities of the way to do it. And that's once again, the gift and the curse. There's lots of possibilities, which is a great thing, but it can also be a huge detriment. So I want to encourage people, make sure to check you out on any podcasting platform. Just search for the Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities podcast on all platforms. And Candice, the one question I want to ask, and I'm very curious about this. If you could go back and talk to dental hygienist you before the injury, before all of the life-changing things happened for you, and say you spoke to you back then, what would you say to yourself? Because first of all, I'm curious, were you content and happy being a dental hygienist?
No.
Okay. So because if you were,
no.
If you were, that'd be a different story. But what would you say to yourself?
Don't get me wrong. I love my patients. They became my friends. But the act of actually, being the hygienist and cleaning teeth and all that was not exciting for me. I was told that I'm not going to pay for you to go to college to take time and space. So you're going to pick your major and you're going to pick a job that you're never going to have to worry about finding a job. And that's how I ended up becoming a dental hygienist. If I could go back and talk to the younger self, pre-dental hygienist, I probably would say that, no, I'm not going to be a dental hygienist. I'm going to figure out what I'm most passionate about and pursue that. And also would be telling myself, there are so many possibilities in this world for you to do, be, have, all the above. And that further exploration should be needed. Like, put the time in, figure it out, figure out what you really love and what you want to do.
And so now I want to ask this question also, because there's many dental hygienists out there, people who are in an industry and kind of stuck in it, and their identity is wrapped up in that industry. So what would you say to somebody who's at that point? Like, they've already been stuck in something for many years that, makes them an income, supports their family, is a steady job, but they're really unsatisfied. What advice would you give them?
I feel for them. Trust me. I don't want to say something that's going to make anybody feel less than, right? Because, it's important. We do need dental hygienists. There is a shortage. They do make a good income. But if you're not happy doing what you're doing, go back, think about the things you did love as a kid and growing up. Think about the things that you're passionate about now, and at least start to pursue those as on the side, maybe a side hustle, until you can transition. Because again, life is too short to do something that you're totally not happy with.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I love it. Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities, the podcast. Thank you so much for doing what you do, for breaking free, for having that huge breakthrough. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
I have one quote that became kind of like my mantra this year. Kind of adopted it in January. And that is, when you walk with purpose, you collide with destiny. And that is by Dr. Bertice Berry. And you can find her on YouTube.
When you walk with purpose, you collide with destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. I love that. That's really good. Candice Snyder, thank you so much for being a part of the Unstuck movement.